What's up, everybody? Kris Gethin here, and welcome to another episode of the Knowledge and Mileage podcast. Today's guest is the composer, East Forest. He has been the leader of underground sound meditation ceremonies around the world. And while his blissful and beautiful wash of electronic acoustic orchestral ambient pop can be contextualized along with Aphex Twin, Philip Glass, and Sigur Rós, the fundamental mission of his project is to create sonic architecture for others to explore their inner peace. Thus, this is a process creating thresholds for the listener to cross over, whether through his music, ceremonies, retreats, podcasts, meditations, talks, or myriad of other offerings. His collabs and albums have charted #1 on iTunes 3 times. That's August and May of 2009 and August of 2016, and have been among the Billboard's top 10. Now, I met East Forest probably about 6 months ago now, and I got to know him a little bit more through his partner, Marissa Wepner. And it was funnily enough, a couple of times, I started listening to his music and he'd come up in conversation, and then other people would say, oh, wow, East Forest, he's here in Boise, which is now where he resides. I'm like, yeah, sure. I didn't know he was that big of a deal. I had no idea he was that well known until I met him and started listening to his music. More specifically, the album that I absolutely love is that he's collaborated with Ram Dass, and it's a phenomenal album. Little did I know that Ram Dass had had a stroke, and the vocals that he had strung together had a separation of about a minute in between, or sometimes 30 seconds, sometimes a minute, sometimes longer between each word. And East Forest masterly edited this together, put music to it, and it synchronizes just amazingly perfect. Anyway, let's get into this conversation with East Forest today. I'm sure that you will love this. It is very deep, so sit tight and welcome to another episode. You see the same when you're in Europe. A lot of the roads were built for horses and carts.
Right.
So then as people...
Not RVs.
Not RVs at all.
Or rentals in their back, yeah.
Yeah, and not the amount of vehicles that are out there now. So people park on the side of the road. So now there's only one lane, especially if you're looking in Wales, where I come from. There's very small, windy roads. Yeah. And, small parking spaces, small shops, small everything. Mm-hmm. When you see the size of the vehicles over here, I think instantly, these people must all work on a farm. They've got an RV. They have to be on a... Yeah, because, right. That's the only reason why you have an RV a lot of the time, or an RV, like a truck. A truck in the UK is because you need to go off-road. Right. Where it's not so much here. Maybe gas is cheaper. People just think bigger.
No, here it's to compensate for your penis. No.
That's it. It's the longer the hood, the longer the bonnet, the shorter the penis.
Yeah. Yeah, so and we're in the historic area too. That makes it another level of complexity.
Of course, yeah, for sure.
You have to get a certificate of appropriateness.
Yeah,
which is a hilarious name.
I found it very entertaining when people would show us houses up there, real estate agents say, yeah, this was built in 1930. The door handle is from 1940. And I'm thinking...
Is that a good thing?
Yeah, probably not. A lot of plumbing issues, whatever. But anyway, I was just wondering, how on earth am I supposed to fit my bed up this stairwell that's no wider than myself?
Sometimes you can't. Yeah, I had an old house, and we could not get certain beds and furniture upstairs. I'm like, well, I guess that's that.
Yeah. That's it. You make do.
Yeah.
So it was funny because I had a conversation with my father on the podcast several months ago when I was in the UK, because I found it fascinating when, we talk about everything that we have in abundance today. We have air conditioning, we have heating, we have light, we have these devices. And back then, there was no light. People would spend most of their time in the kitchen because that's where the heat was, because that's where they were cooking, so that's where they were huddle. And, even in the winter, I remember him saying that the ice would be on the inside of the window. Yeah. There was no double glazing or anything like that. But nobody, he said we were never bored. Where a lot of people, now we have all of this abundance, And a lot of people saying, what should we do? Right, I'm bored.
Boredom's a modern affliction.
Yeah, it is. Because we're used to being distracted by something as opposed to being connected. We always think about this as being connected, as opposed to really connecting, which you would. Like if you're living on a farm, you're connected with nature, to the animals, your time, have an adventure. Where we think that connection is something very different now. It's the opposite. So I always look to actually spending time moving from city to city to come to here to Boise, then up in Sun Valley, Idaho, where I was just a few days ago for 4 or 5 days. And the more that I go to smaller places, the more that I feel more connected. Where you go to, like I know that you spent time in New York. You were in New York for some years.
Yeah. I mean, I just drove up yesterday from Boulder, Utah. It's 200 people. I mean, I was there for a month. So it's like living in an RV that I call my tiny home, but it's an RV. And that's super nature, It's totally inconvenient, but I go there because it's nourishing. It's a place of repose. It's a place of being reminded of these things. Like I see this, it's one of the darkest places in the U.S. At night I see ridiculous stars, the Milky Way, and that's puts me in my place. And seeing wildlife all the time, and I have to pay attention to the weather and the wildlife because I don't control everything, and so that's humbling.
Yeah, it's fascinating. So when you were spending your time, you were in New York for about 10 years? How long were you there?
Yeah, my 20s, yeah.
In your 20s. And I could imagine at a younger age, it's like the place to be.
Absolutely. And now I couldn't live there.
Yeah. But at that time, it's like you want to get connected. You want to have the opportunity. You want to plug yourself into that social pipeline.
Yeah, you want to hustle.
Yeah.
I want to do, it's the fame game, the fame, money, the whole thing.
Yeah.
You're fully on that train.
And, when you're there and you're in, whether it be New York, whether it be Mumbai, whether it be London, I think a lot of people search for that connection, but a lot of people just have the blinkers on. I find it even here in comparison to when I was in Sun Valley for some days. We held a retreat up there, which was phenomenal. It was awesome. And we'll talk a little bit about that from what people got from it that really surprised me. But I noticed, like, for instance, here, if I go to the gym here, and I've been going to the gym here for several years, generally I won't talk to anybody, and generally no one's going to come up and talk to me.
Yeah.
It just is what it is. People in and out, in and out. However, when we were in Sun Valley, I was only there for 5 days. I'm connecting with people all the time. Obviously, there are people there that are definitely well off financially, but they feel very secure within their lives. Like there's no insecurity. They don't need anything from you. They don't think that you're going to take anything from them as such. They're like, hey, you just want to converse with me? You want to be a part of my community and what I'm about? Sure, that's cool. And I really like what you're about. And I really loved that. I had people that were like 70, 80 years old, females coming up to me saying, hey, I really like your hair. And I love that. And I thought, wow, I never get this when I'm in Boise, even though Boise isn't New York. You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah.
There's just...
Nobody likes my hair, but...
They don't like it?
Yeah,
you need to go to Sun Valley. They'll love you.
So. What hair I have left. Use it while you lose it, is what I say. What I like the most about Boulder, Utah, down there, and that is the community. Besides the nature, it's the people. I like seeing people I know, and there's a sense of accountability everywhere I go, because there's only 200 of us. So that's a really special thing.
And that's Boulder, Colorado.
Utah.
Boulder.
It's the Boulder no one's heard of.
God, that's what I was going to say. I thought it was bigger than that.
No, this is 4.5 hours south of Salt Lake City, 6.5 hours from Vegas. It's really in the middle of nowhere. But it's geologically like this crazy environment of canyons and mountains. And I mean, it's stunning. And I think the reason it wasn't being lived in is because it was so rugged. Like you can't just build a road through it because there's these 1,000-foot canyons all over the place, and so just you're looking at millions and millions of years of geological, artistic work going on, and it's really a stunning place visually, but it's also one of the most spiritual places I've ever been in my life on the whole planet.
Okay, now being a musician, a composer, are you going to places like that to get creativity, to get ideas for your music? Because listening to your music,
Yeah.
I find there's a huge hybrid of different entities, whether that is, going
It's
to
diverse.
yeah, very diverse,
Yeah.
obviously Ram Dass in your latest piece is an inclusion of that. Then if you listen to some other pieces like your Music for Mushrooms, is that the title?
Well, the Music for Mushrooms, a soundtrack for the psychedelic practitioner.
There it is.
It's the
There it is.
full word salad title.
But there's a lot of nature within that as well. And
Field recordings, yeah.
yeah, and I like that because I was thinking, okay, perfect. I'm in Boise, Idaho. I can go out to the nature. I can hear that. But maybe somebody's going to be in the depth of New York or London,
exactly.
whatever, and they can listen to that nature as well. So is that part of the process of you going out and spending time so you can connect, so you can reconnect with the audience?
I think indirectly. I mean, it's not like I go there and then that's where I write and so forth. But absolutely, as I was saying earlier, going out there is a place of inspiration for me, and a place of really more of like humbling. And there's something about that humbling that puts me back in my human place as opposed to just being up here in my mind, where I'm often am anyway. And even when I'm there, I have ways that my ego and my mind finds ways to take over because I'm connected on the internet and stuff. It goes out and stuff like that. But just being ensconced in nature and sort of always feeling like you're outside is taps into something primal that feels healthy. It feels like it's a medicine intuitively. So I don't know what the constituent parts of that are, but I know as the overall sum of parts of being there feels like some kind of medicine that's helping balance out me being on the road and me being in cities and airports and all these other sorts of things. And initially, back when I was in New York City, when I first started East Forest Project, I didn't really have an agenda, but I was going up to the Adirondacks from New York City. So that's about 5 or 6 hours north by car. It's the only way to get there. And that was the closest true wilderness next to New York City. And it was kind of a pain in the ass to go that far, but that was where I was going to do some backpacking. And I was really tapping into that sense of like, oh, this is wild land. This is true wilderness, some of these spots in the park. And by recording the sounds that I was hearing, the wild sounds, whether it's crickets or fall leaves or the wind, or it captured a certain character of it and an energy of that space that did translate. Like the memory of and the feeling of that place came back when I would just listen to that field recording. And so I started bringing that into music. And it felt almost as if I was cheating because it really brought the soul of a place in just by putting it in the song. It was kind of like, wow, that really added depth and character to this music so instantly. So I started experimenting at first with those juxtaposed against field recordings from like people talking, sounds of New York City, the other urban and the nature, and kind of pitting those together in my first record. And it's something that's carried forth on different records at different times. And all the way to 20 records later to the Ram Dass record that just came out, all the field recordings there were from Maui and around Ram Dass's home. So that was more about like giving a sense of context and bringing in literally the sounds of his environment and nature into the record because I just thought it helped give it some textural space and honoring to where he's been for the last 15, 20 years, Maui.
Yeah. And for those of you that don't know Ram Dass, is a spiritual leader and quite a powerful individual. And he had a stroke. How many years ago did he have that stroke?
I want to say 15 to 17, something like that. But yeah, he's been in a wheelchair that time. And at first he has aphasia, which makes it difficult for him to connect his thoughts to his words. So he has a hard time talking. His brain's there, and that was evidenced by when I went there to record him because what he said was so masterful, but it took him a really long time to say it. And so I would ask questions and record it, and then I could take out some of those pauses between the words in the music, and all of a sudden the pauses, not only did they not matter anymore because it's inside the context of a song and the rhythm of music, but they actually were like an advantage because it kind of brought down these little teachings he would put out into like little phrases that I could then, the tempo goes this way and a phrase goes up and then he speaks and then something else comes in and it all just sort of fits together and you don't notice it when you're listening to the music.
Yeah, and that's what I thought was so phenomenal and powerful. I knew the story behind it,
Yeah.
where, like I think Marissa said that sometimes he would say a word and then the second word wouldn't come for a minute
Or more, yeah.
or more later.
Yeah.
And so you're wondering, okay, is this going to make sense? But when you snipped it all together, it made complete sense.
Yeah, it was like
and
he
it's
came
very
alive.
Powerful. Yeah,
He did, because in the moment, it's true, I might not be totally tracking what he was saying, and I was just,
so
my
you
brain's
wonder
all like trying to catch up.
How is he tracking that?
It must be a lot of work.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's phenomenal. So the one song that I really liked was "We Are Truth."
that's fun. Yeah,
And it's very powerful because he does talk about connecting and being in a world of like ghosts, essentially.
that's how I felt in New York City.
Yeah.
Like a ghost. You're
Exactly.
surrounded by people, but nobody looks you in the eye.
Exactly. And everybody's trying to fill this ghost, and obviously as a ghost, it's just passing through.
The hungry ghost.
A hungry ghost. Yeah. No one's actually got that fulfillment that they're seeking. People go to the city a lot of the time to get that fulfillment, and they never get it. And I find as I'm getting a little bit older now, because I used to be that guy, but as I get a little bit older, I guess I face my mortality. I see people around me who have some sort of problem, disease, or pass away. And I think, okay, now I need to slow things down. I need to connect a little bit more, lower my cortisol levels, be a little bit more present, gracious. Because, if I pick up a gratitude journal for the very first time, and a lot of people go through this, it's like, what should I be grateful for? And it's like, shame on us for thinking like that. So I have to connect, and being here, like in Idaho mountains, connecting a little bit is allowing me to improve, for instance, from a physical aspect. If I'm talking to my audience, my recovery, my performance, my cortisol levels, my thought process, enjoying the journey. Because I think that is one of the problems that we all encounter, is that, okay, if we're looking from a competitive nature, we're trying to cross that finish line. We're trying to get on a bodybuilding stage. We're trying to pull this amount. We're trying to get that girl, that job, whatever. When the success is really in today, the present, because the present is the future, but we're always looking at the future without thinking about the present, instead of creating what we have right now to create that future and enjoy it. Because I spent a lot of time in India as well, training a lot of Indian Bollywood celebrities. And what I noticed is that a lot of these people had everything in abundance. They weren't necessarily happy. I'm generalizing, but there was a lot of people out there, as you know, in India that have very, very little, but are extremely happy.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, really, the only game in town is our sense of well-being in the present moment. Everything else is a mirage. And I would think, in a lot of ways, I mean, would you say that your life in process is largely focused on wellness, fitness, or kind of the same thing?
I'm trying to combine them both, because health and fitness has a huge disconnect.
Absolutely.
And I'm trying to connect them both with the spirituality and with the wellness.
Yeah, because I think all of that stuff we do to work with our body and our minds and our diets is to set the stage for our connection to what it means to be alive, what it means to be incarnate as a human. And that is the only real show. Everything else is sort of this ancillary thing around it. And I mean, like you said, it is a very fragile thing we're doing here. And we die. And we die at times we don't know, and it can happen in a heartbeat, quite literally. So, the work we're here to do, I feel intuitively, has something to do with sort of a general acceptance of what is, and that cultivation of the gratitude for the small things in the moment, because there isn't anything else. The goals, in a way, they're helpful. They're helpful for me too, in a sense of tracking my process, but you can so easily get lost in them. As you said, once you achieve any of these things, it's often rings hollow, because again, you're actually stepping into what was a mirage. You're stepping into what was just previously an idea about the future, and now it's just now it's the present moment, and it's the same present moment it's always been. So then you have to reconcile what it feels like. Well, how do I think about this thing now? It's like, well, you can keep thinking about it till forever, but those are just the wheels turning. And so it's sort of like I find that that connection to the heart mind, connection to sort of that intuitive heart space is where we live in that present moment, as Ram Dass would say, being just loving awareness.
Yeah, loving awareness.
And
I
that's
like
all
that.
you really are.
Yeah.
And all the rest is a dance. It's Leela, it's play. And when you can recognize that, it's not that you're trying to turn it off. We are here to do that dance, but it's more just watching that dance go by and less kind of saying, that's everything, that's me. It's like, well, I am loving awareness and I can see this dance happening. And by doing that, doing the stuff like priming our body and doing all the stuff so our bodies are working efficiently and cleanly, I think is so that the antenna, the mechanism and the machine that is the human body can be at its best to do what it does, and that's be here now, as Ram Dass would say.
Yeah, exactly. Be here now. And Liam Gallagher, I think, stole that from him later.
I'm sure he did.
Probably claimed it as his own as well. And, it's fascinating what you say there, because I remember when I used to compete in natural bodybuilding shows. Didn't matter if I got second, didn't matter if I got first, I'd always cross into the abyss. And I always used to say, I recognized that, okay, even though the competition, and I've competed in other events, Ironman, triathlon, ultramarathon, the day of the event is the worst day for me, even though it's something that you're driving towards, because at the end there was just so much emptiness. Because it's like, okay, I've been so disciplined, so scheduled, so focused on this goal and blanking out life, that now once I've got there, like you said, it was a mirage. It was kind of like just, and you're pounding yourself at the same time, because
Right.
once you've crossed that abyss, okay, now I'm going to push it harder. Now I'm going to train harder. Now I'm going to eat more. Now I'm going to just burn myself out. It's like pushing and pushing this car without stopping and tuning it up. Because the engine is obviously like being present, making sure what you're putting in your system is healing you and not harming you. Because in the sports performance industry, you look at supplements as an example. A lot of supplements can harm you. There's a lot of healing supplements. You take them all, you'll probably die within a minute. But, there's that disconnect of what is health and what is fitness, especially when you have social networks now. There's a lot of comparative nature that's out there. I want to have that girl's butt. I want to lift that 600 pounds, and it's instant gratification, so I want it now. I'm not willing to, I'd say, put in the sacrifice before really experiencing that success, but realizing what is a mirage and what isn't. What is that fulfillment? And is it being actual present and improving yourself with your connection with your health, fitness, spirituality, your soul, whatever it is. And one thing that I had a conversation with my fiance this morning that, there are so many muscles that you've been working that I haven't been working, and vice versa. And I think we all have something in common where it's like, okay, we really want to work our soul. We want to work on our mental muscles. That connection, no one's looking at you and go, hey, dude, you've really been working your soul. I can see. It looks great. Where we look at something from a vanitarial aspect, it's like, okay, those delts are looking great. But what about your heart? That's what's going to take you to that next level. And having that connection, it's all encompassing. It all has a transcendence effect on each other. The more connection that you can have, the more fulfillment you're going to have out of doing your delt workout, having your chest workout, eating that quote unquote boring, bland meal that you have to put yourself through again. But appreciating that, because there's a lot of people out there that don't have the opportunity to eat a boring, bland meal.
Sure.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, your body is, for lack of a better word, it's a temple. It's your only vehicle you get. So I think it makes sense to honor it by keeping it as healthy as you can, which these days feels like being your own detective, not just about nutrition, but about toxicity. And it's a pretty challenging game. And our bodies can really put up with a lot coming at us all the time. But it is a challenging task to kind of, because we have to recognize too that we are animals, right? We have these different octaves of consciousness that go down to the physical form. That we are physical beings, just like a rock is, right? We share the same constituent matter parts. we are the same. And then you step up to like a plant. Just like a plant, we have a sense of breathing and we seek the light in a way. We share that too. And you go up to like animals and mammals. Like if you have a dog, it reminds you, it's like, oh, I need structure. I need exercise. The same thing the dog needs. You need that too. We often just forget a lot of these things, just like sunlight, or we forget that like if I don't take care of those animal needs, this whole system, this whole human thing, the other higher levels, when you go up from there of like the ability to be creative and brotherly love and cosmic consciousness, all the things that go above there, you can't even access those because maybe you're burning sugar all day long or you haven't been sleeping. So it's like the machine that you're in is sort of like that temple, sweeping the floors, so to speak, of your human temple body is the only way that you're going to be able to be present and access the things that make you human, which is the ability to be present and self-aware and have creative thoughts, have the feelings of love, have the feelings of cosmic awareness. I mean, the fact that we travel between all these different realms at once feels quite special. I know it's unique on this planet, but it feels in my heart, it feels like, wow, that's a pretty special thing. And what it must mean to be human, because there has to be all sorts of other kinds of life in the universe, and I'm sure it's myriad ways that it manifests. This little game we're doing here, I read in this book about, I can't remember which book it was, but it's the idea that if you come here to incarnate on Earth, like that's considered sort of a tough gig. But it's a faster, if you want to work through your karma and your stuff, this is a faster place to do it. Because it's really juicy. Yeah. There's a lot of grist for the mill.
Yeah.
But it's sort of like the brave souls think, yeah, okay, I'll go to Earth. I'll do the human gig.
Got it.
Yeah.
So speaking of the human gig that we try to connect with all the time as we are disconnecting, do you practice a lot of like ancestral wisdom? Like do you go through phases of fasting, grounding, earthing, and making sure that you get in the sunlight, the restorative red in the morning or at sunset? Are these any practices that you encounter yourself?
I mean, I kind of follow sort of a primal paleo-ish lifestyle. When I say ish, it's not super strict because I think my mind goes to I can easily be very disciplined, but sometimes to a fault. And so I try to find a little bit of a middle ground with that. So things that really work for me are saunas. I built a sauna down there in southern Utah that's a wood-fired steam, old school with the cold dunk. That's been a really critical aspect of my mental health and well-being. So I do that at least every night or every other night.
Awesome. Well, are you building one here in Boise as well?
I would like to, but we'll see because I don't know what the city thinks. No.
Then if that is the case, you're going to have to come on up the road to our place because I got a sauna there out back.
Oh, nice.
As well. It's an infrared though, but
cool.
it's a low EMF.
Cool.
Infrared. So
yeah, that's a whole nother, as we're talking about like being a detective of your own bodies. You're like, oh, I'm going to get a sauna. You go buy one, and then you go down the rabbit hole about EMFs, and there's lots of different opinions on whether that's good or bad. But it's certainly, that's why I try to go back to like the basics. And I'm like, okay, look, it's a wood stove. It's heating up the room. I can pour water on it. There's no electricity involved. And then I'm going to go get in some cold water.
And that's where all the finished studies are backing up.
Yeah, hopefully I can't screw that up, right, by my own ignorance. And I do other small things like, the basics. I try to get outside. I try to exercise. I try to make sure I'm getting enough sunlight. If I'm not, I take vitamin D. I take fish oil. I try to be on a low sugar diet as best I can because I know what that does to you on the inside. And I try to, with devices and stuff, God knows I could do a hell of a lot more to be more disciplined with that. But I do small things like, blue blocking glasses at night. And I know the sleep is important. So I'm not someone who's like romanticizes, oh, I'm going to stay up all night and work on music. Not at all. I like to be like small and consistent steps every day is more interesting to me than sort of the big burnout for a few weeks. Like little bricks. And that's kind of been my winning strategy my whole life that I think set me apart in my 20s all the way till now is that I'm willing to do a little bit every day and that's sustainable. But do it, almost every day for all the time. And most people, they might do a lot for a couple weeks and they have this big thing and then they crash and burn and then they have a year where they don't work and then they do more. It's like, no, I just kind of keep chipping away, keep chipping away, keep chipping away.
Yeah, or that cyclical approach to work. A lot of the time, people go hard during the week,
Right.
but then maybe they party all weekend.
Yeah, weekends don't make sense to me. I actually dislike doing anything on weekends because I like to go out on like a Wednesday or a Tuesday when no one's out.
Yeah.
And it always would annoy me where it's like, oh, it's Sunday, so such and such is closed or someone can't do this. I'm like, why not? Who decided Sunday was like a special this or Monday? It's another day.
Yeah. I'd always question people, is the weekend your WEAK end?
Right.
Or is it a weekend?
It's like vacations. I've never liked the idea that I need to even have a vacation. It's like I don't want to feel like to escape my life. My life should be designed well enough, if I'm fortunate, and I'm totally blessed to be able to make these choices at all, but that I want every day to feel interesting and exciting. And sure, some days you got to chop the wood and carry the water more than others, but I don't want to feel like I have to wait to then escape. Oh, now I get my rest from life. And it's a really sad state of our world. Like Mondays didn't used to be a thing that people, that it wasn't a meme. Like, oh, it's Monday. You know, it shouldn't be that way. It shouldn't be that day means I have like this new attitude about life because I have to go back to work.
Yeah, I see it in the gyms all the time. Everybody's there on a Monday. Come Friday, they've all gone. Let me ask you, did you, in regards to sports, I can only assume that you never really participated much in team sports.
I wasn't that good at them. I remember like in elementary school when we do the pickup football, when I was probably like 7 or 8. I didn't know how the game worked. And so they'd start
I still don't.
Yeah, well, so they'd throw the ball. I'd run the wrong way, and they'd all laugh at me and stuff. And no one ever taught me. And so I think there were some early occurrences where a little bit small traumatizing as a child. Sort of you get this story in your head like, this isn't for me. I was connected to things like the outdoors. And so then I started getting into more like solo type fitness stuff. Like I got into weightlifting when I was 15. It was a class at school. It was an early bird class. And I was a scrawny little kid. And so I wanted to get bigger. So I thought I'd take this class at 6:45 a.m. in the morning with the other high school football players. And it was awesome because like you learn the basics, like old school, you know, form, bench press, sets, reps. If you want to bulk up, you know, the old school basics, you know, do you want to lean up and endurance? And I just kept doing it. After that ended, I joined like a little gym in town and I just kept like lifting. And then in college, I was never like a bodybuilder, but that was my way of fitness, was lifting for like 20, 30 minutes, but not really stopping. So my heart rate's up. And I just did that really until a few years ago when I just kind of got bored with gyms. And then I started trying other things like swimming, yoga. And now I do my own fitness sort of lifting, but just using my own body weight or like TheraBands and stuff at home. Because I'm like, I don't need to really go to the gym to do a lot of what you can do now. You could get kettlebells, you could do all these different things on your own. And I run now or I swim, and I do a lot of like hiking. And so I notice like when I'm hiking cardiovascularly, like I get stronger quite a bit faster. And I actually feel like I'm in better shape now as I'm older than I was when I was younger, and trying not as hard.
I think it's because you've become a little bit more connected now.
And maybe diet, I don't know.
Diet,
because when I was younger, I didn't know shit about diet. You know,
and maybe a little bit more on edge when you're younger as well. Cortisol levels are spiking.
Yeah.
Who knows? But you know, I could only assume that you'd participate in individual sports. You know, much like myself, because you're not getting. Because you're traveling your own journey. And you're not getting influenced so much by others. Yeah. And I find that people who, like I grew up on a farm. There was no kids to play with, so I sought my own adventure. And I just did not like to participate in team sports. I didn't want to make it feel stupid. I didn't want the pressure on my shoulders.
I didn't like being told what to do, frankly.
Yeah, that's why you're your own boss, I guess.
I always hated that, yeah.
Yeah, and when doing so, I think in a young age, if you're encouraged to participate in your own individual sports, so you're not comparing yourself to others. I think you become, to a certain degree, and I'm generalizing, healthier as you're not influenced by everything that we're marketed to, which is a social norm today. As I mentioned, you look to Instagram, you look to others, you look to the newspapers, whatever. There's a lot of pressure out there for a lot of people, and I'm not just talking comparing your body type to someone else. That expectation, of you, is your job of this level or this level. Everybody has, some sort of level that they have to compare themselves. And you look at when you go to the supermarket, when you go to the coffee store, you're being marketed to constantly. You go in for a coffee, you end up coming out with 1,000 calories.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people are constantly being influenced, but they don't have it within themselves to say, this is not normal. This is not the social norm. I need to step back and do what is right for me, because am I going to live a life in regret because I didn't spend more time on this, or slept in more, or ate more bad food and it's going to harm my future? Probably not. But unfortunately, a lot of people get to that time in their life and it's too late. Maybe they get a hospital visit, they get a doctor's call, or something worse. It's like, okay, now I've got to make that change. Instead of looking at this preventative measure that can heal you, they're always just trying to step around, or they're not looking at the straight line concept to where they should be really going.
Well, I trust, too, that we all have the intuitive knowledge we need to have. And, if someone or any of us, we often don't make change unless we really have to. And that comes, unfortunately, from things like near-death experiences, bankruptcy, divorce. That's when we make real change. And you see that, I believe, happening as a planet as well. I don't want us to go bankrupt or have a near-death experience as a civilization, but it's sort of happening in slow motion. And people need to have the journey that they have. And I used to try to think that, I don't want to just be looking out through the lens of my own life and judging other people's lives, even though I might think they're making some pretty serious mistakes. And this is a bit of a paradox because, action and direct action and not just sitting back and being passive. There is a line that we're meant here to affect choices and change in the world, but people have a path that is perfect for why they're here, and when they change and when they make the choices they make, they need to make those choices, and we can influence them. In a sense, we're all here, I feel, to inspire one another so we can see and make those choices and get out of the dream. And that sort of seems to be the point of being here. And so you are fulfilling your gifts that fits perfectly with your journey, but hopefully then it's also inspiring others to, might be a spark in there. That's just what they need to hear. It's like this perfect piece of artwork. The complexity of it is nothing you could ever imagine, but it's perfect. And there's an element of destiny in there, and there's an element of choice in there, and that seems like a contradiction, but that's the mystery. That is the cosmic mystery, that those both coexist, and we're not meant to understand that. Otherwise, the jig would be up. But people like my parents, I used to want to change them, right? I used to want to say, well, if they just learned this or this book or had this experience or changed their diet in this way. And I was the one experiencing all the pain through that because they weren't changing. And eventually I realized, well, what if I stopped trying to change them and just love them for the way they are and honor that they're perfectly where they need to be? I had a friend who likes to say, everyone graduates in the sense, in the spiritual sense. Everyone graduates. The timeline that we look at it in, that's just our anthropomorphic viewpoint saying, well, one's faster than another. Well, if you throw time out the window, everyone graduates. So it's relax. It's just love each other. It will happen as it needs to happen. And at the same time, as the Dalai Lama wrote in his recent book, is all about action. And not just sitting back and saying, well, I'm just going to be the spiritualist who doesn't do anything. It's no. You can take action in the world and should. But there's a fine line to where you're trying to change things that are really just sort of bouncing off the mirror of yourself, how you're viewing the world. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean. And I'm wondering myself, where is that fine line? For
A
instance,
line's actually the wrong way to put it. There is no line. There's no edge, actually.
yeah,
I'm actually looking at it in a human way. It's
which
like,
way in the balance do you go, though? Because, for instance, like if I'm thinking, just selfishly from my perspective, I want my father, my mother to be on this earth as long as possible. Because so I'm going to try to influence them to make better decisions, better choices. But in saying so, if I'm the one that's hurting and if I'm the one that's getting frustrated with that, then maybe this time that I have with them that could be extended is just not going to be quality time. So maybe I should just focus on the time that I do have with them, and that is it. Whatever.
well, and that's all you have anyway. The rest is in your mind anyway. It's a projection about the future. I had a friend, one of my neighbor down there in southern Utah, who died about a month ago, completely unexpectedly. She's probably in her 50s, and everyone was quite surprised in town, obviously, and it was shocking. And I just went up to see her widowed husband yesterday for the first time, and I brought him the Ram Dass record, and I was just trying to, what can I do? Just to say, hey, I'm witnessing this happening, and just wanted to, witness you and be here and stop in. And we're sitting on the couch, and he said they were devout Buddhists, a deep meditation practice, and he still does. And I can tell he's really hurting. He also said to me, Judith was her name. He says, Judith, I really feel and have realized now, was ready to go. She had done the work she needed to do, even though we all look at it like she died, quote unquote, young. But he says, it doesn't change the fact that I wail in tears and go in and out of this, but I also feel and I know intuitively like she was ready. She was done. And we are the ones, again, that say longer is better. It's a philosophical idea, but to say that if someone dies young, that's worse or better than if someone lives a long life. I mean, yes, we look at it from our human viewpoint and say they had more they could do, a life fulfilled, but who are we to know what that life was to be fulfilled? And the gifts we give one another. By Judith dying a month ago, again, a complex tapestry of work that fits in perfectly for her life and her work, but also for Stephen's life, her partner, that was talking to me, how that fits into his journey, perhaps his karma, how you want to look at this. Even mine, as the neighbor and the small role that I play in that. Even yours hearing this story, and even everyone hearing this story. It's that complex, I think. And I just feel that in my heart. Do I have any evidence to prove that? Of course not. It's just like I grew up in a family of like rational materialists, where it's very much the old school idea: if you can't see it and prove it, it doesn't exist. And that was a very painful way to live. And so I've spent a lot of time cultivating sort of an antidote to that there's more to what can't be seen and what can only be felt. And you could easily argue as a rational materialist, actually, you're saying, well, that's just because that's how you grew up, and that's why you're having the opposite reaction. My sister is actually like a devout Christian, so she found it in her own way, actually, in a similar way, just a different path. But I would say, yes, you're right, and it's the perfect setup. That's why it's the way it is. Like, that is my journey. Of course it's that way. So it's a both and. It's not that one's wrong; it's all right. And the world of matter and the world of spirit, to me, it's the same thing.
That's fascinating. That's a very deep answer. That's just got me deep in thought. Now,
how does it make you feel?
It a lot of self-reflection.
I don't mean that in a judgment way.
No,
I mean, really,
no.
What does it bring up in your body?
A lot of self-reflection and a lot of appreciation for what I have experienced and what I hope to continue to experience, as opposed to, like you said, taking a step back and pointing the finger, because maybe someone doesn't think the same as you, so it must be because of your upbringing.
Or what gift is that for you? How is that setting the stage now? I mean, if you look back, I would imagine, at everything that's happened to you, would you change any of it? Because you wouldn't. I mean, here you are. And moreover, you can probably now, in retrospect, see, well, that led to this and this led to that.
Yeah.
And again, the rational review would be like, of course it did. Everything leads to what it leads to. But I'm saying, of course it did. It's like, but how does that feels right?
Yeah,
right.
It definitely feels right. And, it's only, I'd say, over the past 2 years when I've had that question, what would you have changed? that I've actually come to surface and say I wouldn't have changed a thing. And I say that with wholeheartedly, with honesty, not just to say, well, that's what's led me to where I am now, but that's what's able to allow me to come to this place of self-exploration, to think back and take a deeper dive to see what I'm all about, to try to have that connection. Because, like, you know, for instance, like you've created the album specifically for, you know, people having an experience for psilocybin. Well, I've done, you know, my listeners know that I've done a lot of drugs, and that was partly because why I left Wales, because it was like the rave capital at that time in the early 90s, and there was a lot of self-indulgence, but I was doing obviously the drugs for overindulgence and for the wrong reasons. Maybe it was a mask, who knows? It was a good time, but for the wrong reasons for sure. So I have a different thought on psilocybin now. I haven't done it for many, many years, but now I know, for instance, like the FDA have like fast-tracked it now to be a drug that can help with PTSD, anxiety, you know, various mental disorders. And, you know, maybe that is now something that I should reflect upon.
It's a
completely
tool.
different. Yeah,
it's a tool that we have not fully been harnessing in Western society since 1970, pretty much when the CSA, Controlled Substances Act, at least here in the States, went into effect, and that put us down a different path. But look, for many millennia of human history, it's been a very, very, very seemingly important and powerful tool for human beings. We've just lost our way a little bit with this, and it's coming back. There is absolutely a renaissance of interest and science, recognizing like, all right, we went a little overboard. Let's do some research. I mean, why not, right? So there's some really amazing research happening, and then there's cultural wind shifting, as you saw with the decriminalization in Denver, Oakland, and there's probably more that's going to come, where the people like us are starting to say, like, let us decide how I want to explore my own consciousness, especially when there's benefit and very little harm from certain substances like psilocybin, aka magic mushrooms. So that's happening now, and that's something I've been interested in because it had a powerful impact on my life and my own development. And so I wanted to make tools, music, to help people with that experience, because the music is a central part of the experience itself. I mean, one of the largest aspects that can really make it positive and powerful.
Yeah, like I can only imagine. And with the music, what I love about, you know, for instance, I've been listening to, you know, the Ram Dass album quite a lot.
Yeah.
And surprisingly, I liked it a lot. Because
yeah,
it's not
what's surprising?
Because I've never really listened to music like that before. Like the softest music that I'd listen to would be sort of like indie, but there was a lot of versatility to it. But then I thought, well, this isn't really soft. There's a lot of depth to it, and you know, someone may listen to it and have a completely different experience and a chapter of the book within their own life that they'd be able to write from it. That's what I love about, for instance, if I was to go watch you live, there could be 1,000 people there that are all hearing 1,000 different lyrics or different message from you. And I just love the message from it, knowing the story behind it, but I just love the depth and the versatility. So, for instance, I thought, okay, this is going to be perfect for me to listen to while I'm in my sauna and meditating, because I've started meditating quite a lot over the last several months. But then I've started listening to it in the car, listening to it like when I was doing cardio this morning. And then it wasn't until I actually started doing what I was doing while I was listening to it, going, oh, this feels right. I'm surprised. Yeah, it was a doorway. But now, for instance, okay, I'm on the bike this morning. You know, that's very different to, let's say, we're just going to pound it, where I'm going, okay, now I need to be present, lower my heart rate, listen to my breath, focus on the rotation of my pedal stroke. And it just made me feel good.
It sounds like a trance state you're getting into.
It was a great trance state.
Which is awesome, because then you're very receptive to these ideas and you're able to plant sort of seeds of your own choice in that place. And what an amazing thing to do. I would actually think, like, when you exercise, you could probably very easily get into that sort of meta space with your brain and
like
trained.
Active meditation.
Absolutely. And so I would say what you listen to in that space is powerful, because you can really plant stuff into your unconscious, your heart, however you want to look at it.
Yeah. And like when I was listening to Mind Karma, And I was like, wow.
That's a trippy one, yeah.
This,
like, what does that mean? Your karma is your mind.
Karma. Yeah,
yeah,
it was perfect.
There's a lot of stuff in there, like you said, to really chew on. And at the same time, the way the music, sort of like a film score, it really engenders a feeling in you. So it's amplifying the emotional content, like the way you feel about it. But at the same time, what he's saying is poetic, but also quite deep. Like, wow, it's really making me think. But at the same time, I have this emotional response to it, whether it's I'm loving awareness or your karma is your mind, or this idea about what it means to be truth and what is truth. And he's a master. I mean, I was so blown away. I was a huge fan. The guy was a teacher in my life just by me reading his books and listening to his talks. But when I went to record him, and what he said is exactly what you hear in those songs, it really blew me away. There's a lifetime of mastery of ideas and speaking and poetry, and those little 1 minute ideas essentially that he put out in each song. It's like who can really do that over and over and over again? You had 14 different little ideas, little micro teachings, and I think that's what he thought was important to talk about now, like what's relevant to today, to the crises that we're facing, the transition essentially we're in as a society.
That's what I noticed. It was very much apparent to what I was thinking right now. The
very
discussion that we're having now is very relevant. Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, wasn't he one of the first large spiritual leaders as well that actually experimented with psychedelics and kind of opened another pathway where where people could experience a deeper self and more loving awareness, as it were, by participating or applying different types of these psychedelics for different outcomes.
It was 1960s. He was a professor at Harvard, and it's where he met Timothy Leary, who is also a professor at Harvard in psychology. And these guys are at the top of their game, right? Harvard tenured track professors, the best place in maybe the world. This was their dream. And Timothy Leary started to be introduced to psilocybin. I think I just heard this on a podcast yesterday. It's from a guy from the CIA, actually. That's a much whole sidetrack how the CIA was exploring psychedelics for mind control. And so they were bringing it into the world by giving it to different people. And a lot of the people they gave it to, like Timothy Leary, I think the guy from the Grateful Dead, the guitarist,
Go figure.
They almost accidentally caused us talking about it today and Ram Dass becoming Ram Dass and all this stuff. But they had experiences themselves with psilocybin, LSD, that blew them open, and they were fascinated by this as psychologists. What is this, and why it's showing me so much more? And there's a song on the record called "Home" where Ram Dass talks about. By the way, his name is Richard Alpert when he was at Harvard, about how his first experience with psilocybin started him on his spiritual path. And that's a huge statement. Basically saying without that, he might not have gone to India, met his guru, become Ram Dass, brought that back to the United States, this whole Eastern idea. I mean, he's arguably the psychedelic grandfather of our country. And so that led to the Summer of Love, 1968, the proliferation of LSD and everything else that happened, Richard Nixon freaking out, shutting it all down, just making it all illegal. And not just that, Schedule I drugs, meaning they have no medical benefit, et cetera, et cetera. And then it's fast forward all the way to today, 50 years, some odd years later, we're just now cracking that egg to say, hold up, there's definitely some medical benefit. They're non-addictive, so it doesn't make sense for it to be a Schedule I drug. And at a minimum, let's start this process of exploring what we might have lost in our fanaticism and excitement. And Ram Dass has always brought a levelness of, he has that intellectual weight of his background. He has that psychedelic history. He's also an amazingly charismatic and funny speaker. And so he was a great person to be out there all these years because he was really not talking about psychedelics as much as just spirituality and what it means to be alive and how to be alive. And that was part of the story and still is. And he doesn't shy away from that at all. It just turns out he was ahead of his time. Now he's 88 years old, and he was doing this in the 60s.
That's crazy. And he's still ahead of his time. So, it's funny, when I first met you several months ago in your kitchen, I didn't really know who you were. I'd seen you online on Marissa's page and whatnot. But since then, listening to your music, listened to you on Aubrey Marcus' podcast, which is phenomenal as well. Yeah. And then your conversation, you have come up in conversation several times because I'm listening to your music and I'm going to places like the Boise Float Center. I don't know if you've been in a sensory
Did they
deprivation
use the music there?
Well, I
have been there.
was talking to them. I was like, "Can you put any music on that I want?" And I was like, and they said, "Yeah, cool. Just give us your phone." I was like, "Cool. Can you put this on then?" And I put on a Ram Dass album, and they're like, "Oh, East Forest." And I was like, "Yeah, you know him?" And they're like, "Yeah." And I said, "Okay, yeah, I just met him like about a month ago." "Oh, where did you meet him?" "Here in Boise." They're like, "He lives here
I've been
in
there.
Boise?"
I've been that place, yeah.
Well, these people had no idea that you even lived in Boise.
There's a float center, that national one, that licensed some music of mine, and they used this song called "Let Go." That's on my Music to Die To record. I'm like, that is perfect. That's what wakes you up out of the experience at their float centers. It's this deep. It's actually from a psilocybin ceremony. Nobody knows that, but like it was recorded live in a psilocybin ceremony. It's this deep song where like you just hear like this heartbeat with me hitting my chest, and then the keyboards come in, and it grows and it builds and builds and builds. It takes 13 minutes, and then it just drops down to this back to the like octave down heartbeat, and that's what brings you out of the float.
Got it. That's perfect. Well, I found it perfect for the float. Let me ask you this: have you ever done psilocybin and then gone into a sensory deprivation?
Oh man, I'd be afraid of drowning.
You'd have to move somehow.
That's the classic story of people on LSD who would drown in a bathtub. I mean, you just get. If you had I wouldn't do it. I'm sure many people have, but if you had a really large dose, you're out of body. You get confused. Yeah, you could just turn over. You just get confused.
Yeah, especially when it's complete darkness. Because I went in there a couple of weeks ago with my friend who had never been in one before. After about 30 minutes, for no reason, he just started to get very anxious in there. And then he was trying to find the way to get out. He couldn't find the handle.
Oh, God.
He found what was the hinge. In the
back, the piston
hinge.
thing.
Yeah, the piston thing. So he's pushing on that, and he's like, "Oh my God, it won't open." He thinks that's the handle. So now he's like pushing with all of his might, and he actually gets out there because he freaks out. Yeah. So I could only imagine what it'd be like for somebody to actually, in that instance, to take a huge amount.
Well, let me just not put out this meme of danger. There was a lot of false stories that came out purposely, like misinformation, like, oh, you take LSD, you're going to jump out a window. You take LSD or psychedelic, you're going to burn holes in your head.
Hey, you could drink a bottle of vodka and do the same thing.
My point was, like, it's not like that's what happens. And the reason I'm saying I wouldn't do that myself in a float tank is like, well, look, I'm a cautious guy. I'm not a young kid anymore. And I like the idea of kind of being in a ceremony where I have a sitter, someone just being like, hey, man, I'm just watching over you. I don't have anything I need to do, but I'm just here. And it makes me feel safe. And I'd probably be in my head if I was in the float tank and the reality started to slip away. I'd be all of a sudden anxious, like, wait a minute. Am I going to remember which way is up? Even though I do, and I get into this head trip about it. You just want to be able to feel safe.
Yeah,
that's
exactly.
absolutely critical, is that you feel safe walking into it. Then you can let go.
Keep your head above water, as it were.
Exactly.
Have you done, I assume, but my dad always told me never to assume anything. Have you done an ayahuasca journey in an atmosphere where you have a shaman there, you have a watcher?
I have, yeah. That was back in 2008 when this whole East Forest thing started. That's when I had my first experience with ayahuasca with Peruvian shamans. It's very traditional, very, very strong. And I did that a few times here in the States with those Peruvian guys who'd come in a few times a year. And then I went down to the Amazon with my old partner. Crazily, on our honeymoon, we thought it'd be a good idea to go down and do a traditional dieta in the jungle. And it wasn't just like, now there's lots of different ayahuasca places to go, especially in Peru. And some of them are quite posh, right? Like you get nice food and screened windows and nice mattresses. Yeah, pool. And you do some journeys, and we met, and I knew this guy from doing the work in the States, and I said, hey, can you take me down? He says, well, I have a guy I can take you to, but look, it's like he's really old, and it's old school. This is how the shamans have done it for thousands of years, but I'm telling you, it's not pampered. And I said, that's what I want. He's like, okay. And so, it's the whole thing. You go down, you're going on these crazy roads, you hike through the jungle, and then you're there traditionally for a 10-day dieta. And you're in what's called a tombo. It's just a thatched hut with a wooden plank for the bed. We brought a bug net with us, and you're just in that tombo for 10 days. And the shaman comes up and brings you something to drink 3 times a day. And you just drink it. And he was more of a vegetalista, so ayahuasca plus other plants. And that experience in itself is a much longer story about what was positive and negative about it, but that was sort of like I lost over 10 pounds, in 10 days. I was so weak. But I think what was powerful about this, it sort of showed me how things have been done, a really sense of context, like really going down to where the plant is growing and whatever the experience ends up being. And having the trust every time to drop that cup into your body and drink, not knowing what it is, was a journey in itself for me of just trust. So that was something. I haven't worked with ayahuasca in several years. I don't really feel the need to right now, and I often feel it's a calling when you need to. It's a very intense experience. Psilocybin's always been more my personal guide in life, but I also don't work with that very often. Yet at the same time, I feel it's very present in my life all the time. I don't mean to sound strange about it, but it just feels like I remember the lessons I learned in those experiences so clearly. Not like a dream, but I remember it, just like I remember anything. And so it's present. I don't feel like I need to be tapping into that by taking the medicine all the time.
No, I think you're probably like in a position in your life now where you're actually applying. You're not just a student of learning, you're a student of applying those habitual needs that's going to help you further. Like when I was doing a lot of psilocybin and acid and whatever when I was back in the UK, that wasn't my thought process. It's like, how much of this can I take with my buddies?
Getting high,
and probably forget everything, as opposed to remembering it. Remember the hallucinogens that I'd get from it, and that's pretty much about it. But with the ayahuasca now, have you read Gerard's book, The Shit the Moon Said?
No.
He owns Rhythmia.
No, I haven't.
Very fascinating book. So I don't know if you know about Gerard. He's a multi-millionaire, very successful person financially, not with his marriage. He was womanizing. He was doing a lot of recreational drugs, abusing drugs, alcohol. And, the guy had a private jet. He had several mansions and whatever. And, he went to rehab for about 5 years. The rehab
5 years?
5 years. The rehab didn't work. The rehab did not work. And, he had the money to go to the best place. And it wasn't until his son walked into a room and he'd put a needle in his arm and he's passed out. He was very good at hiding his issue, and his son has come in and he remembers just waking up and seeing a sign of horror on his kid's face and confusion. So that's when he decided, I need to make a change, started working on his breath work. He was told that he should probably go to Costa Rica and try this plant medicine, which he did. And then after just 1 week, not everybody, but just for him, like 1 week, everything changed. He downsized his homes to like an 18 by 20 hut in Costa Rica. And that's when he started Rhythmia, because he thought, if this was able to change me as much as I have now, and I've reconciled all my relationships that I've destroyed except for his marriage, I want to help others. And that's what he's done there. Maybe not as intensive as what you did, 10 days. I think it's like you take the medicine 1 day on, 1 day off, 1 day on, 1 day off.
That's pretty intense. Yeah, it shows you things and you make the change yourself. But what it shows you is so, when you're in the space, what I found, at least in my own experience, is it's showing me the thing, let's call it a lesson or whatever it is, and it's so strong and powerful that not accepting it, not letting go and accepting that lesson is one of the, maybe the most painful thing you've ever experienced in your life.
Right.
And there's nowhere to run.
Yeah.
I mean, meaning like there's no, I'm going to grab my phone and distract myself, or I'm turning this off, I'm going to leave. It's like, no, you can't.
Yeah.
You're in it.
And that's why you said you have to wait until you're called. You can't be influenced. You can't be pushed to go down there.
And that's the intensity of the experience. And so for a lot of people, that's why it's so powerful, because it shows them these truths that are coming from the inside of their own psyche and heart and life, and they don't want to feel that pain, and they see that so clearly in the experience that they're like, why would I resist this? It's like you can run but you can't hide.
Yeah.
So I might as well choose now. It's sort of a near-death experience, and that's, again, going back to saying that's what really affects change.
Yeah.
People sometimes need some really strong medicine. And so particularly today, with what we're facing in a personal level for a lot of ourselves and a global level, the crises, we need often something quite strong. And so psychedelics are one particular tool that might be able to help affect faster change.
Yeah.
And we kind of do need some things to be changing quite quickly.
Yeah, and what I find fascinating now, because a lot of my listeners may be thinking, God, what's happening to Kris here? He's turning into a bit of a hippie, or what's going on? But like, there's a lot of like thought leaders, CEOs, founders of multi-million-dollar companies.
Most of Silicon Valley.
Exactly, Silicon
Even
Valley.
Crick with DNA, and
Yeah, you'll sit around a table with all these billionaires and millionaires, and you'll ask, has any of you practiced any sort of like a LSD or psilocybin to help with your structure, the mentality of where you are now? Everyone puts their hands up. It's like, okay, these people don't look like recreational drug users, as it were. And I don't know if you know Dorian Yates. Do you know Dorian Yates?
No.
So Dorian Yates is a 6 times Mr. Olympia, biggest, powerful, most bodybuilder on earth. And when I saw him in Dubai, we were both working at an expo a couple of years ago, and he told me over the phone, Kris, you've got to do ayahuasca. And the first thing that he saw me...
Somebody told me too the first time. I'm like, oh boy.
Yeah. And when I saw him in Dubai, it wasn't like, hey, Kris, how's it going, man? What's up? It was like, Kris, you have to do this ayahuasca. And I was like, what? So I started talking to him a little bit more about it. And since then, he has actually hosted ayahuasca at Soltara, with the shaman. So he's going back there again in November. His son is actually coming to this one. And I was like, well, Dorian, I don't feel like there's anything I need to work on. I've had a great upbringing. But then I would hear it come up more and more in various conversations.
That's usually how it starts to call you.
Yeah, and more people I know. I said, wow, I had no idea you took it. And then as I become more plugged into the biohacking community, more people there. It's like, okay, this person's been there, this person. Then I hear it more on these podcasts, these books show up. And now it's like, okay, now.
So when are you going?
I'm going in December.
There you go.
Going in December. Yeah, so both myself and Sunshine are going there, yeah.
I can offer one piece of advice on your trip. It's one piece of advice someone gave me, and it was a great piece of advice. But finish your story.
No. You carry on. I want this piece of advice.
The only thing, doing the dieta, absolutely. The dietary preparation, it's essentially a cleanse.
Yeah. So, there's colonics. There's colonics that happen.
Yeah, the stuff they say to eat, not eat, which might not really fit in with your traditional thoughts.
That's fine. I fast a lot anyway, so I'm good.
There's a reason to why it helps, but it will help you in the experience, just kind of like having your body kind of clean in for what works for that. But really having that meditation practice that you're working on, I think will be the biggest anchor in the experience, and will be home base most likely in the experience. And having that be familiar to you, like just maybe a breathing practice or whatever it is, will be gold.
I'm actually doing Wim Hof's breathing course this Saturday that's being held here in Boise.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah. So that's another step to hopefully go in the right direction.
It'll be great, And the thing with ayahuasca or any psychedelic journey, you never know what it's going to be, and it's usually different every time. So you just have to walk in with no expectations and just an open heart and a clear intention of why you're there, and it'll be what it needs to be.
Yeah, okay.
And you'll be fine. You'll be safe.
Oh, I'm looking forward to it.
You will come back. Everyone comes back.
I'm being called now. Well, yeah. Okay. Well, thank you ever so much for your time. And everybody listening, I will put all the links in the show notes to East Forest or Krishna, to East Forest.
Eastforest.org.
Eastforest.org.
Or anywhere else you find East Forest.
Okay, for the music, because I noticed on the store there last night, I got the Ram Dass album, but now I see it's available on vinyl.
Oh, yeah.
So I have to get
You
the
can
vinyl.
only get that at my website, eastforest.org. It's on a limited print. We're getting lower, but it's beautiful double vinyl.
Yeah, they'll be perfect.
It's so awesome. It looks amazing. Has all the lyrics, and it's like folds out, and it's a splatter vinyl. Yeah.
Badass. Highly recommend it. So I really enjoyed this conversation, my man.
Me too, yeah.
Thank you very much for coming down here and fixing the board here.
Yeah. Did it work? Did we get it recorded?
Yeah, I hope so. Otherwise, we'll have to do it all over again.
Yeah.
All right, everybody, thank you very much for listening. This is the Knowledge and Mileage podcast, and we is out. Hey guys and gals, if you don't know already, I have my own personal platform called healthkick.com. That is spelled with a K-I-K, by the way, where you can have access to my 6-month video documentary comeback, my push-pull program, my ebooks, my daily emails and blogs, my programs, and so much more. I also have bi-weekly webinars and a private Facebook group, and you can subscribe and get all of this for free once you do. So all you got to do if you want access to all my daily content is go to www.healthkick, that is KIK.com, and you can check out the link in the show notes to take you right to my personal page. Thank you ever so much for listening to the Knowledge and Mileage podcast. I really, really do appreciate you, and I appreciate the sponsors too. So please do go to the show notes, check out the links, check out the discount codes that they've been ever so nice to provide to you, and show your support, because it is these sponsors that allow us to float this podcast and bring it to you every single week. Thank you ever so much. Until next week, we is out.